I want to talk to you about one other option that we have that's not listed in here that I really think that it would be good for you to consider, and then I'll open it up for questions. Given the time of year, given some of the situations that you've been through, and the fact that you have a fairly new board, might be not a bad idea to consider an interim. And I don't want to scare you by using the word interim, because sometimes that word is scary for people. An interim is somebody that can come in, work with your school board, work with your district. They're typically an experienced or retired superintendent, so they have a lot of experience with the budget, with protocol and procedures. They've probably done building or facilities projects. They also are not as, what's the word I want to use? They're not as shy about the politics involved in some of the matters that might be going on in your district right now, because frankly, their job security is, you're here for a year. You're here to move education forward. You're here to help us get through some of these bumps. Quite frankly, looking at some of the situations that you've been through right now, and we've seen this happen in other districts, this happened at Howells Dodge a couple years ago, you may not have a very large number of people that are saying, I want to go to Neligh-Oakdale right now. That's not to say you're not a great district, because you are. But it might be tough for people to see through all of the different things that are going on right now to see how good you are. It might take having an interim here for a year to repair some things, to keep things moving in the right direction, and then advertise next year when you will be in a much better spot. Maybe in October we hit it hard, so that you're on the front end of the search season instead of the back end where you're going to pick up people that are left at this point. So I really want you to consider that. And the way that it works with an interim is, as far as the fee goes, we would charge $500 to put an interim in, and we have a large group of people that are retired that we've worked with in the past or that have expressed interest in being an interim. I would look through files and try and find a couple of people that would be a good match for what you might be looking for. So that might be, let's have a work session and let's talk about what you're really looking for. But let's do it quickly. If you decide to hire the School Boards Association and we want to move forward, we want to get this done in a week. We want to get this done no longer than 2 weeks from now, where we can meet with you and maybe even by email of doing a survey of what the needs are. I can send the survey out via email. But let us help identify some individuals that might be a good match. And then we would set up interviews and you would move forward. It would be $500 to help you out with the interim part. That $500 would credit towards the full search when we go at it in the fall. So instead of $6,000, you would be billed $5,500. The way we do the billing with the full search is we typically do 60% at the outset, and then we bill the last 40% plus travel costs or expenses on the back end after you've successfully filled the position. But as I said before, we don't want to see you just fill the position to say, we've hired, we did it. Pat us on the back, we did a good job. We want to see you find the right match, and that might mean getting an experienced superintendent in here that can handle some of these issues that are going on and really help move education forward in the process. And again, it's usually somebody who isn't really going to mind if they don't have a job next year, and that's not meaning they're going to come in and ruffle feathers and cause problems. They usually have a very savvy way of handling things, but you know, it's a little more unbiased. They're not looking at, well, gosh, I don't want to make this group mad or this group mad because I want to have this job again in a few years. So I just really want you to consider that and think about it as an option.
And to follow up on that.
Yes.
So could we start a full-blown search, and then as time passes, if it looks like the applicant pool is getting unsatisfactory, could we then say, you know what, it looks like, and I'm saying it's the 1st of April.
Yeah,
but
that's
you
really
see where I'm going with this, or
right.
The middle of March, and we say, you know, maybe we'd rather, it'd be wiser just to take the interim route. But first make a run at it. Yep. Is that going to change our cost, our fee at all, if we take a run at it first and then decide to do?
What we would probably do if you were going to hire us to do a full search is we would bill the 60%, but again, if we end up filling an interim, we're not going to charge you that search fee again in the fall. What we'll do is we'll just wait until the search is filled in whenever, January, December, January, and then we'll bill you the back end of the 40%. So if we do start out as a full search, we're going to bill you the 60% of the $6,000.
Okay.
But we will not recharge you that if we end up putting in an interim. Now, here's what I would say. If that's something that you want to do, we would want to start advertising immediately, and we would want to target to be interviewing towards the mid to beginning of March. You would not want to wait till April. That's going to be way too late. You know, most administrators need to let their school districts know by a certain date if they're going to be coming back or not. So we don't want to push up against March, April, mid-March, April, because that's going to be getting to be too late. We have had districts that have tried that. Last year there was a very, very large shortage of individuals that were what I would consider to be quality in the group, and so there were 3 districts that started out on full search and ended up putting in an interim, so that's exactly what we did. You know, the only thing I would say about that, David, you don't want to hurt the pride of your community and your people by saying nobody wants to come here. So that is the only downfall of if you go forward with the full search and the right people aren't in the group, are people going to be offended? Are people going to be, you know what I'm saying, morale? If you just start out and say, we're going to put an interim, and this is what the board thinks is the best thing to do, we're going to move forward with an interim, and then we'll come back and we're going to hit it hard in the fall when there's more people available that are quality individuals. There's not a whole lot of searches left out there that people are going to be applying for, but there's also a dwindling number. There's still a couple people left, but that's not to say they're not going to be interviewing here in the next couple of weeks. So I really think you want to consider that. You know, if moving forward with a full search could do some hurtful things to the pride and the morale of your stakeholders.
Thank you.
Okay. Any
How
other?
much of a say do we have in the interim?
Well, what we would do,
chosen?
right, you would select the interim, although I will say we have a couple of retired superintendents that have said, look, I'm not going to interview for a job. I've been at this too long, I'm too talented, if they want me, I'll do it. But there are some people that are retired superintendents that don't want to interview because they don't feel that they should have to do that. And so we kind of run into that sometimes, but what we would probably do is present to you a couple of options, and we can do that distance learning. And we can talk about them and say, you know, here are a couple of people that have expressed interest that we think would be a good match. Maybe has a little bit to do with geographically where they're located as well, so that maybe they could commute, or maybe it's somebody who would relocate here for the year. It really just depends, but you absolutely would have a say in it. We're not just going to come plop somebody in and say, here's your interim. We would bring you, you know, people and say, this is somebody we think would be a really good match. Might be somebody that you've heard of and you might not be interested in them for some reason. But we do want to do it quickly, and we do want to be a big part in bringing somebody forward that we think would be a good match, because we do want it to be somebody that's not biased in any way. We want to make sure it's somebody that would be, you know, somebody that would be able to come in and not have sides, if you will.
And then during the interview for a full search,
Yes.
That process, is the entire board included in that?
It is
Or is it a
absolutely critical.
committee?
No,
Okay.
not a committee. No,
Okay.
no, no. The whole board needs to
Very good.
support whoever it is that's
Okay.
hired, that you negotiate with, I should say. No, the whole board has to participate in that process, and we will accommodate the schedule however we can. For example, if you want to do 2 interviews a night, we'll have the candidates come in during the day and kind of follow each other through. So one will start at 1 o'clock and one will start at 3 o'clock, so that you're interviewing one, and then you'll have a half-hour break to deliberate and visit about that person, and then you'll interview number 2. Same thing for the next day, so that you can try and interview 3 or 4 people for the full search. But the whole board must be present for all interviews and for the discussion, so we need to make sure it's scheduled so that that happens. It's so important, and it's not uncommon when you have board turnover that you're not the board that hired the superintendent, and so maybe this isn't what you're looking for now. Things change. We understand that. So we want to make sure that now the setting board fully understands who it is that is going to be the right match, and that you're all in consensus so that you really move forward with a positive light.
Thank you.
This is a great question. I'm glad you asked that.
All right, you say about the interim, what makes you think that our situation is going to be different a year down the road? Timing, I understand, timing is different. What makes you think that there's still issues that have to be resolved in the next year? So the person that sits in that chair has to be able to handle some situation that we have to move forward with
Right.
relatively quickly.
Yep.
So what makes you think that by postponing it will benefit us?
I think history with other districts, I suppose, in working with them, but I will say, Brad, that there have been a lot of districts that have hired an interim and kept him for years. It doesn't mean that you have to move forward with a full search in the fall. If you decide you really found a good match, you'd like them to stay another year and to continue to work on things, absolutely, you can do that, and we'll just come and do the search and finish it up whenever you're ready to finish it up. If you want to keep them an extra year, that's fine. We have many examples of that. I know it's Skylar, Dan Hazing's there. He's been there for several years as an interim. He was hired as an interim. Out in Wallace, they have that going on right now. There's a lot of situations like that where they would really like to keep their interim because it's such a good experience for them. But past history would say at least moving it back 6-7 months, things can calm down a little bit. You can let things heal a little bit in that amount of time. Also, when those individuals come in that are interested in your full-time position, when you're doing the full search, they can come in and they can maybe meet with your interim if it's been a good relationship, and the interim can talk to them about, here's where we're at with things. Things are really moving in the right direction. But like I said, if you feel like you need another year with the interim, that's okay too. A lot of districts will do that. They'll just extend it for another year.
On the negotiations with the interim, Sherry, how does that work? Do we negotiate completely new contract, or are there some guidelines? What happens there?
That's a great question. What you would do is, we typically suggest that you contact your school attorney and have them draft an interim contract, which would just be a 1-year contract. Usually with an interim, a lot of times if they're retired, they don't need benefits. Some of them might still want benefits, but they don't usually need benefits. They also don't usually need a lot of vacation days, because sometimes an interim will come in 4 days a week, sometimes they'll be here 5 days a week, but sometimes they'll take a long weekend. But you'll just really need to get a base salary, and usually with the interim we tell you, keep it steady. Whatever your superintendent's at, keep it steady so that when you do hire that full-time superintendent, you're not then going from way down to going way back up. You want to keep your budget consistent. You want to keep it consistent for your stakeholders and your taxpayers. So we just say keep it level, but a lot of times they won't need those extra benefits because they've got maybe a pension they're already getting, or they've got benefits because of Medicare or who knows what. But so that will all be part of that negotiation, and we can give you some different scenarios of what other districts have done if you need that, but that's typically how it works.
Okay.